am so excited to introduce you to Denisha Bonner. She is a member at Palette, and we are going to spotlight her today and catch up. We haven't actually chatted in a while. And did you say you just came back from out of town?
Yes, I was in Cincinnati earlier this week.
Fun, fun. It's always nice to get out of Dodge. So first and foremost, I want you to kind of give everybody a little intro into who you are, what you're up to, and how you found us at Palette.
Sure. Again, I'm Denisha Bonner, and I was in Cincinnati last night. And part of the reason I was in Cincinnati is because that's where I'm from. So when we moved here in 2018 to the capital region, my husband and we were getting ready to start River of Freedom, and we did a video at Palette. Like our videographer used the location, and we just fell in love with it, and we connected with you guys, and the rest is history because you were so wonderful and welcoming, and it just supported so many of our needs for our personal business and ministry and service and whatnot. I mean, the video was great. Everybody loved the video. But the more I sat in the space, I kept thinking we could do a lot of good stuff here. So that's how.
Absolutely. Well, it's always it's something like I don't know how you feel about this when people say like, "Oh, I go to yoga, it's like my church," or "I go to work out or I go to the gym because it's like my church." So I used to tell people all the time like Palette's like my church, but then you brought that to fruition and started having services at Palette Schenectady, so it came full circle.
Yeah, it did. And I mean, it's so, I told someone, she was like, "Do you guys have your own building?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, well, you will one day." I said, "And even if we do, we're going to decorate it just like Palette. It'll look just like Palette because it's been so, with the name of the ministry of River of Freedom, one of the things we wanted to do was create a different experience for people. And it does just that. People have walked in off the street and they look around and they're like, "I like it here. I could come back here," just
Yeah.
because of the way it feels and looks. And you can sit on the couch and, be in community with people. So it's been such a gift to us, as hopefully as much as we've been to the community.
Yeah, and now when people do say, "Do you have a building?" You got to say, "Yes, I have Palette," because it's absolutely,
Right.
yours. I didn't just build it for me. That's for damn sure.
And we love that so much. I mean, just the freedom to be in there, and we had something for the youth in March, and just it was just such a great opportunity, and just it brings people together, which, as the sign says, more humanity, more collaboration. We
Yes.
get to come together in a way that lives out the mission of Palette.
I love it. Okay, so I always, I say you're the queen of a lot of things, and most women are, right? We can do it all. But kind of, so you're a minister. You work with your husband, which I can tell you from personal experience is a challenge, or can be a challenge. And
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about the other things. You have a consulting company, and then you just started this Trust Academy, which I have to hear more about.
Yeah, yeah. So my background is in education, but it's also in therapy. So I am a clinical counselor, and I have a whole license in Ohio, New York, and Michigan. So I have a private practice where I support individuals in the journey of becoming a human, staying a human, recovering from other humans, right? So I get the opportunity to walk with people through their journey, their healing journeys. I also do trauma consulting, right? So organizational work as well, helping organizations create healing spaces. And I've been doing that like internationally for probably like the last 10 years. But most recently, I'd been really thinking with kind of the merging of my work professionally, but then also our spiritual foundation and ministry. Like, that's such a missing space, like to bring both of those worlds together. So while I train hospitals and schools and, and all kinds of things trauma related, which also sits like in that DEIB, the belonging, all of that work that heals us from the trauma, it was really important to me to bring that work into faith spaces as well. So, most recently, this week, I launched the Trust Academy. And TRUST is an acronym which stands for Trauma Responsive Understanding for Spiritual Transformation, right? So, all of us want to be in safe spaces. We know the power of connection, just even with our brains and our bodies, what happens inside healing and trusting relationships. And so, getting to do that work individually with clients, then also at a collective level with corporations, organizations, and knowing that unfortunately faith spaces have been a source for many people's woundings and pains. but to actually bring that same level of learning and expertise into places that really do have a good intention to serve the world, but to make sure that they're doing it in ways that are actually helpful, actually healing, and create being a part of the movement of
I
healing.
love that. I mean, accountability is huge. We all need it individually, and then obviously those in power need it. You know, very much so. And I think sometimes once you start to advance yourself professionally or spiritually, you start to get into this like higher level where you might be a little isolated and you don't have people around you, calling you out on when the things when you're doing things that are inappropriate. Um,
Ex-
and so I love that you're doing this work, and we can't do it alone, right? So having you doing this and putting yourself out there. I mean, and the other part of it too is that it's difficult work to deal with, right? Like it's difficult to come to somebody in power or a big corporation that has a lot of resources and say like, listen, yeah, you're well intentioned, but the way in which you communicated this to your entire congregation or your
exactly.
yeah, it's huge. So how can people so the consultancy is something for individuals. So if individuals want to work with you on a personal level to do this types of work, kind of can you talk through how that process goes and what they can get out of it?
Sure. So again, there's kind of three tiers in which I serve or show up in the world. One is like the individual work, right? So my first company is called The Crown, and that's an acronym. We like acronyms apparently. The stands for Total Healing Experiences, and I really started that company to do more advocacy and awareness around mental health. Um, we've caught up a little bit in 2023 with the power. I mean, even May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's very timely for this conversation. But the Crown stands for Creating, Restoring, Overcoming, Winning Now, and really helping people to have more courage to find and seek help and to raise awareness of. There's a quote: 100% of humans have brains, so mental health is for everyone. And so, really raising that awareness that people need safe spaces. And I do a lot of training for other therapists and people who are trying to become good clinicians. And so the Crown is where I do a lot of that training, talking the DEI work, consulting as well, whether it's people with their private practices trying to grow in their ability to be good clinicians or to be good service providers. And then the Trust Academy, which is available for organizations, faith organizations, churches, ministries. They can, go to the website and engage with us as well. And that consulting is myself as well as other clinicians, providers, doctors, nurse practitioners, lawyers, that we come together to really help support organizations from a holistic. So we train on trauma responsive ministry, trauma sensitive preaching, which is a huge thing for me. Even like you go into some spaces where it's got the lights and the smoke and it's really, a great aesthetic. But I always think about, what does that feel like for someone who has anxiety and they're in a dark space with room in a room full of people that they can't see and identify? Like, that looks good for videos, but it's not really good for people to sit there and be comfortable and hear whatever, life changing message might be coming across, because I'm wondering about, am I safe in this building? So really helping people to even assess things like that. Like, what am I saying? What's the sound bite, the reel that's going viral that might absolutely send the wrong message? And I think a lot of times people don't think about that. So the Trust Academy is that type of organization where people can connect, or if there is something that's going on locally in their community, how do we show up? How do we support? How do we understand? Like in 2020 with George Floyd, there was a lot of awareness that we as communities of believers needed to be doing something different, and people didn't really know how.
Right.
So being able to support and say, here's curriculum that you can use at your church, here's how you continue to show solidarity, here's how you actually have action, not just words. So the Trust Academy has those types of consultants where we can support ministries, communities of faith, and even those who maybe don't ascribe themselves as a community of faith but want to learn more about the transformative power of understanding trauma, understanding healing, and how humans facilitate that
Yeah,
process.
absolutely. I mean, and then it's also helpful to have support from an organization like yours to sustain the work that you are doing, right? So if you're
Mhm.
in this field of being of service to others and being that place where people come to get information and get support, you need support too because it gets to the point where you're like overwhelmed yourself. And
Yeah.
I think it's exciting to see that you're all in. You've always been this way, but like you keep on like exploring and investing in more ways to be of service to your community. And I think it's amazing. And I would love for you to tap and just like kind of address the Surgeon General just spoke about the risks of loneliness in the world.
Mhm.
And I think that this is absolutely, they may not be putting any money towards it yet, but just to bring awareness to the risks of isolation, loneliness, depression, your mental health not being healthy, whatever. So, like, I would love for you to speak on that. And I'm kind of like hopeful and excited to see more people are coming around to the notion that they need therapy, that they need help, that they need support, and we can't go at it alone.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting because, there are studies that show that a lot of psychological disorders come from isolation. So even really working to have reform around our justice systems and really reducing things, like the solitary confinement and what happens when people are alone. So the importance and value of community connection, right? And so a lot of people come to faith spaces for community. And in fact, even when we talk about it, we don't really call it church. We call it community. We call it gathering together in community. Let's be together around, our shared value of faith, but it's more about community and coming together. And so understanding from the psychobiological aspect of what is happening, I tell people all the time, human brains need other human brains. Human bodies need other human bodies. And so if we really are going to have this worldwide change, but worldwide change that begins individually, we need to be together. Now, because we're human, we all have faults. If we don't understand what being together well looks like, then we are going to do more harm than good. And so, this opportunity to really lift up things that I always lean in, that people are very well intentioned. They don't mean to do things wrong. They just don't necessarily, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know it 20 years ago until, going on this, thankfully, this journey of learning and having the opportunities to sit with experts and learn and to even say, okay, now how do I pull this out and put this over here? This is important. How does this apply in the school? How does this apply in the church? How does this apply at the family reunion? Like really bringing that learning into it. And that's really why we call it trauma responsive. Because, you hear about trauma informed care. Do you have the information? And most people have some level of information, but they don't use it to guide how they respond, right? So when I'm talking to my kids, when I'm talking to my sister, when I'm talking to the cashier at Price Chopper, using what I know to respond. Quick story, during the pandemic, I was using Instacart a lot, like most of us all were, and they would miss an item here or there. And I'm like, okay, yep, stress brain. They're in the stores. They're safe. They're trying to worry about their safety while still keeping a job because they're an essential worker. Denisha, it's okay that they forgot your bananas today, right? Like I don't want to go to the store, which is why I'm using them as their service. What is it like for them to be there?
Yeah.
Using that information to understand what happens to our brains and our bodies when we're experiencing traumatic stress or adversity, and then now letting that lead the way with how we do all of our other interactions.
Oh my God, you're brilliant. You're brilliant because it's another kind of thing that I recognized. I would say probably when I started down the road of like thinking about what palette might be, and when we were, I mean, I didn't know what palette was at the time, but I was just like starting to think how important community is and how important it is to have support and how important it is to surround yourself with people who are going to pull you out of a rut when you may not even realize that you're in a rut. And
Absolutely.
um the thought that um you have it all together all the time is ridiculous, and so what anyway through that journey or through that like kind of like understanding, I came to realize like I'm from New Orleans, and every single year or every other year if we were lucky we would have to pack up all of our stuff, all of our belongings, leave our home, evacuate, and expect and prepare to not return to anything. And it wasn't
Hmm.
until Hurricane Katrina that we actually had to demonstrate what that would look like what the result would that look like, because up until that point, maybe you got floods or some window damage or anything, but it's never as devastating as Katrina. And I just kind
Mhm.
of like in hindsight realized, like, not only was Katrina was a traumatic experience for even the people who didn't lose much, or even for the people who didn't lose everything, it was a traumatic experience regardless. And every year before that we would ever have to leave and think in your
Yeah.
head about like what it might be like to not come home to anything or to come home to nothing.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until like, maybe 5 years ago that I was like, oh my God, that was like really a traumatic experience. When you're in the thick of it, you just
Mhm.
keep going. And I think that that's also what we all experienced during COVID. I can tell you it's
Mhm.
not until like around right now, maybe I guess like last 6 months up until now, where I'm like, oh my God, that was like really, really traumatic. And
Yeah.
having to like just repair everything after that experience of doing, sure, we showed up, we kept going, we did what we had to do for our families and our people and everything, but to acknowledge, you got to give yourself time to acknowledge like what a crazy time that was, and
Mhm.
how do we come back from
Yeah, I think COVID was different in a couple of different ways. And what you're saying, like all of these different events where our lives are at risk, right? So even just the criterion for having a disorder that's connected to stress, whether that's acute stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, other reactions to severe stress, is that there's either an actual or perceived risk to the your life or the integrity of your life, right? So we absolutely saw that in COVID. But what was so profound to me about COVID was the social distancing, right? One of the things we know is that people need people. And I tell people all the time, like, you are working against your physiology. When you're trying not to need someone and people identify you as being needy, too much, all that kind of stuff, it's become this cultural norm that is really not even just physiologically how we were designed, right? And so, even with like connecting and picking up people's energy, vibes, emotions, they're really just called mirror neurons. Our neurons are our brain cells. They reflect what we see in other people. So me looking at you smiling triggers the joy center in my brain. And that's why, we can see each other. We don't have to know each other. We can walk by and see some common theme. It's like, okay, that's right, Beyonce. That's right, New Orleans Saints. Like we just have this connection, right? The reality is mirror neurons are picked up to 6 feet. And so when we were had to be social distance and we couldn't be close to people, I watched so many people have a struggle because just walking through the grocery store, you might pick up connections with 25 people just accidentally. If you're in your office building, you see 20 people walking to the printer. But when we had to be isolated and we had no community, and that's why places like Palette is so important because it provides opportunity for us to connect. We couldn't do that. We had whoever was in our house, our little pandemic bubble, and we were missing so much that just being around each other. So we have this risk to our life with the virus, right? But now we don't have anybody to connect with, or there's no way for us to even get our cups filled, which is again that mirror neuron kind of piece. And we were just really, and I think we're going to see in the journals to come the impact of what that has done to our society for those 2 years where we could not be with people. And so, natural disasters and all those other things are absolutely high on that trauma level. But I think COVID did something different. However, we have an opportunity now through things like Palette, through other initiatives that myself and other members of the community continue to offer that allow us to do some of that healing work, that restorative work, that coming back together, redemptive work that allow us to get something that we missed or we lost in these last 3 years.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm so grateful, like, finally, there's not as much of a stigma about therapy. Like, I'm in therapy, I go to therapy once a week, and I can't do without it at this point. And it's just so fulfilling to me to be able to get clinical response from somebody who has the information and the education to consult with. So I love that more people are in therapy. I love that people are more aware of it. We have like these amazing apps, which I'm not an app person when it comes to my therapy. I got to go talk to somebody in real life. Um, but it's really great, and it's people like you who are going to be part of the solution and that redemption you're talking about. So thank you so much for doing all the work that you're doing, and it's never ending. You just keep on creating another thing that's going to serve more people, and I love it. Is there anything else you want to impart on everyone that's watching or might rewatch this later on?
I think again, any way that myself and all the ways that I show up can serve. So whether that's the consulting, DEI work, mental health advocacy through the Crown, whether that's our worship and community of faith worship with River of Freedom. Again, we're at the Palette every Sunday at 6. Welcome, come in, enjoy some good music, reasonable singing. And the reason I say reasonable because I'm the one singing, but we great music, reasonable singing, great community. We'd love to have you join in on any given Sunday at 6. We're not there long. We usually have snacks and just a laid back environment where we come together and really also think about how we serve the community in the capital region. So we're there at 6 o'clock on Sundays, and then also with the Trust Academy, really creating healing. One of the things people always talk about, like religious trauma or sanctuary trauma or church hurt. And so then my challenge back is, well, then let's create spaces that don't hurt. If we don't like that people say that about it, then let's work hard to create spaces that don't hurt. So, with the Trust Academy, and if there's any way myself or even Justin in our community can serve and support, we're happy to do so. We'd love to do so. We look for opportunities to give and to show up and to partner with people and to stand beside. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but let's put a fuzzy cover on it. So if you've already got the wheel going in the right direction, let's put a little bling on that steering wheel. And so whatever we can do to help, we're happy to do so.
Oh, I love that. I love that analogy. Moving in the right direction with, more joy and support is not a bad thing. So I appreciate you so much for being here. Anybody who wants to get in touch with Denisha, she is such a lovely person to connect with. You can find her on Instagram at Redefining Beauty 32 or her website, trustacademy.org. And also she's at Palette every Sunday in Schenectady. And we need to put that on our newsletter so we get more Palette people there. You got to go to church at Palette. I love it. You totally brought that to fruition for me. So thank you.
So excited.
Again, everyone. Thanks so much for being